Hello and welcome to a review on Jaguar's new SUV, the F-Pace. I'll take you around the car, I'll show you inside, show you some of the technology available with the car, and importantly how the car drives as well. So let's go and take a closer look. So we have a beautiful summer's evening here in which to show off this Jaguar's new SUV, the F-Pace. If you cast your mind back, there was a big outcry when Porsche launched their first SUV, the Cayenne. We've now had the Bentley SUV, we're shortly getting a Maserati SUV, and now we have Jaguar's new SUV as well. Now, the reason for all of these SUVs is that for the automotive manufacturers, they indicate dollar signs in their eyes, because this really is the fastest growing sector of the automotive market. Consumers, for example, in China and America especially, they love SUVs, and therefore if you're an automotive company and you wish to grow the business, you cannot not do an SUV. So despite Jaguar being aligned with Land Rover, they really were always destined to make an SUV at some point. The differentiation comes, Jaguar say, is that the F-Pace is more focused on on-road dynamics. So it's meant to give still a very much sporting drive, but offer the practicality benefits that an SUV classically gives. Raised ride height, which gives a nice vantage point for all occupants, and much more space indeed. This particular F-Pace then, focusing on that, it starts at just over £35,000 here in the UK. For that you will get a 2-litre diesel engine with a manual gearbox. So really, that's not going to be a volume seller. Jaguars traditionally are sold, or specified I should say, really, with automatic gearbox. If you want an automatic gearbox, you'll have to get the 2-litre diesel all-wheel drive. That will come with an 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox and is closer to £40,000. The car you see in front of you is a 3-litre diesel model, and that's all-wheel drive, and that's up at I think it's north of £53,000. If fuel economy and emissions are really important to you, you will want the base car, the 2-litre diesel manual. A claimed average fuel consumption of 58 miles per gallon and CO2 emissions of 129 grams per kilometre. But I think you'll all agree that actually converting Jaguar's typical design language and converting it into an SUV car has really translated extremely well. I think when Porsche tried it first with their Cayenne, it was a bit of an ugly duckling. But this F-Pace, especially on these optional 22-inch wheels, it looks fantastic and is helped, no doubt, as well by the Italian racing red metallic colour. Just taking you around to the rear, you can see on the 3/4 especially, Jaguar typical design cues with this curve here on the 3/4 view, and these beautiful rear light clusters which are lifted straight from the F-Type. You'll also notice that it sits quite squat on the road, and that's to give it a coupe-like roofline and make it look very graceful on the road. Jaguar really did not want to make a big lofty SUV. If they were going to do it, they were going to make one that looked sleek and sexy indeed. Round to the front, you've got Jaguar's classic design language there as well, with the headlights and the big grille. Let's go inside and take you for a closer look. Stepping up then into the interior of the F-Pace, and it is a bit of a step up, as you would expect with it being an SUV/crossover model. You've got a slight raised ride height there. But interior-wise, it's going to be, well, it will feel very familiar to any current Jaguar XE or XF owners. The interior is pretty much lifted straight from that, with the exception of some designer touches, just leaning in here. You've got a nice Jaguar inscription there above the glove box, and you've got some little storage units here, which feature a nice chromed plastic outline. And on the door cards themselves, again a nice finish there, which all helps to improve the perceived quality of the car. A steering wheel lifted straight out of the F-Type to really help emphasise that sporting approach that the F-Pace wants to market itself as. I would say in terms of the interior that it's certainly stylish, there's no doubt about that. Some of the interior quality could be better. For example, the plastics, if I just show you here, plastics here along the speaker aren't really up to standard, I would expect, given the price point of the car. £35,000 for the base model, fair enough. Up at £60,000 for this test model, I'd say they could do with an improvement. Certainly the Porsche Macan will better the F-Pace in terms of interior quality and the feel of the switchgear. Just looking here, what is nice finally is that Jaguar have improved the feel of these gear selectors, which were on all the previous models I've tested cheap plastic, but these have a nice aluminium type finish to them, which helps to improve the perceived quality. Where the F-Pace actually really does better the Porsche Macan, and I would say the Porsche Macan is the nearest real rival to the car, is in terms of interior space. The Jaguar XE, which is their baby entry-level model, is very tight in the back for interior room. So I'll take you into the back and you can really see the gains that you have now with the F-Pace. It's got vastly more interior space and room, which makes it much more practical as a proposition for families. So then, looking at the back, you can, hopefully it comes across on the video, but there is vastly more legroom in the F-Pace than there is in Jaguar's XE. And if I step in, much more legroom in the back, as you can hopefully see there. That seat in front of me is set for me. So it's a much more practical proposition. And one thing I would say actually with the interior is it's to specify the optional glass roof, because it really floods the interior with light and adds to the much more spacious ambience. So if you're looking at having one of these, that really is a must, because it really adds to it just gives a nicer feeling to the interior. Importantly as well, you've got Isofix. If you're looking to carry children, you've got Isofix mounting points across the back seat as well, which all adds to the practicality. And actually, despite the sloping roofline, again, thanks to that glass roof, it doesn't feel restrictive in here. I think if you did without the glass roof, given that these windows are quite narrow, it might feel, and especially with a darker interior, it might feel a bit too enclosed. But I'll just give you another view of that interior from the rear seat. Flicking round to the rear of the car, just to show you the inside of the boot, you can release the boot on the remote here. I think it is an option to have it electrically operated, or I think you can specify what's called gesture tailgate, which is where you waggle your leg under the rear bumper and that actually opens the boot. And actually that's a really useful option to have if you imagine that you've got your hands full of children or groceries, and therefore it just saves you from having to lean over and press the button. Anyway, inside the boot, 680 litres of space, and you can also fold down the rear seats as well. So there's a load of room there. Big boot. So as I say, combining the big boot with a much improved rear accommodation, and really assuming that you have the budget, stepping up from the XE perhaps into the F-Pace is a real no-brainer. And then just to show you, if you want the boot even bigger, you can then drop the rear seats, which gives a huge space there. Massive through load, and obviously you can take the parcel shelf out as well for ease of access. But that just gives you an idea of how big you can actually make the load space of this new F-Pace. So back in the front seat of the F-Pace, just before I move on to tell you about the technology on the car, one nice feature that couldn't have come across before because I think the lighting was a bit too strong. You got some LED strip lighting there on the door. If you just move into the back, you can see it on the rear there as well. Now, in this case, it's a rather fetching illuminous blue, but you can specify the option to customize the interior lighting of your choice on the car, but it just, especially at night, it's a really nice feature, that actually. So that is that. Storage wise in the car, you get massive door pockets. You also get a glove box, which is, I would say, really on the small side. You've got a nice big central armrest here which lifts up. You've got your connections there for the infotainment system, but you've got quite a deep pocket there. So lots of storage space. Now, focusing on the tech, as is usual with modern Jaguars, you get the central touch screen, in touch they call it. Now what I would say is there is the option, although it's quite an expensive option, to upgrade to a larger screen which essentially fills this space here. But it's not just a bigger screen, it actually gives you a much faster processor and it works a lot quicker. Now that is known as the InTouch Control Pro, if I'm not mistaken. So it's certainly worth looking at that, and then it removes these buttons here and just gives you a much bigger screen, as I say, but importantly it's a lot quicker. This is not bad, it's just a bit slow to operate, and that's especially difficult then when you're on the move. Now those that have seen my previous Jaguar videos will know some of the features that these modern Jaguars can give you. One item though is the configurable dynamics that I don't think I've ever shown you before. Now if we look here below the gear selector, you have a choice of modes, eco mode, you've also got low traction mode there as well, normal, and what's called dynamic mode. You can customize the suspension settings, the steering and the throttle response according to which mode you're in. Now dynamic mode gives you the sporting drive that the car is really kind of aiming for, but the nice thing here is you can now actually customize some of those features. So for example, you might want the engine in its most urgent mode. You might want the gear changes to happen at their quickest possible rate, but maybe you want to tone down the suspension, so you can then put it to normal. If you have it in dynamic mode, it firms everything up, so you might want to, as I say, customize that so you have the sporty feel from the engine and the steering, but a smoother ride. So that's a good option to have. So this is the adaptive dynamics, and then this is called the customized what does it say? It's called, hang on, configurable dynamics. Other things unique, I guess, really well, the configurable dynamics is available across the Jaguar range, but the all surface information is unique to all-wheel drive Jaguars. And if we look here, nice model there of the F-Pace on the screen, but this shows how the power is distributed between front and rear, which I'll explain when we go out and drive the car. But the all-wheel drive system will move power from the front to the rear and rear to the front, depending on the prevailing driving conditions, to give you maximum grip and traction at all times. And this handy graph, display rather, shows what's going on whilst you're on the move. Other items to tell you, it's a shame because one thing that this car offers is a wristband called the activity key, and that means that you can lock your key in the vehicle and wear this activity band, and you can lock the keys in the car, and the wristband will lock the car. You can then go off and do surfing or whatever other cool stuff you might be doing, because it is waterproof, and that means then you can then leave all your valuables in the car and then unlock the car when you come back. Other points to note, again, you have a conventional display here, 2 analog dials with a central TFT screen. You can upgrade which is linked to this bigger screen here. You can have a full TFT digital rendered display, which allows for much greater customization because it will put all the satellite navigation in front of you, which is a really useful option to have. Alas, I can't show you that unfortunately because this car does not have it. One thing that I can show you is the advanced park assist feature with the car. So if we go into, press this button here, and we select a perpendicular parking. So it's telling me that it's found a space and to drive forward. Stop and release wheel, well, my hands are not on the wheel. Select reverse, and you can see now I've got my foot off the brake. I'm controlling the forwards and back motion, and the car is doing the steering for me. The point of this parking system is that it does all the steering. You just have to control the reverse via your foot on the brake, on and off the brake, or a little bit perhaps on the accelerator. We're going slightly uphill here, but it does all of the steering for you, and therefore saves you the bother of wondering whether the space is big enough. Now it's now telling me to select drive, so forward, and then if I release the brake, and it should then correct itself like so. Select reverse, and we go then straight back, and it's guiding me into the lines there. Bit disconcerting at first because you feel a little bit out of control, but in fairness to the system, it works pretty well. I don't know if you can see that, you probably can't, but we are parked pretty much perfectly between the white lines and the car next to us. Then just select park, electronic handbrake on, and that's job done. Now the advanced park assist on this particular car can now also get you out of the space. So again, press this button and we will change it now to parking exit. So it tells me to select reverse and wait. Now it's now telling me to select drive, and again it will steer me then beautifully out of this spot, and perhaps not into the BMW in front of us, but anyway, and then you can cancel out the system by taking control of the steering wheel yourself. So we've seen how the car looks, I've taken you through the interior, I've shown you some of the technology involved, but let's now get out onto the open road and importantly tell you how the F-Pace drives. So in the driver's seat of the new F-Pace then, well, the first thing to say is, given that it's a Jaguar, it has to drive really well, and the basics are right as soon as you get in the car, so you get a really nice driving position. And what Jaguar have been very canny in doing is that they've retained their sports car-like feel to the interior. So the centre console, for example, is nice and high. The top of the door cards here, they're almost at my shoulder level. And it really feels like you're cocooned in this cockpit. With a lot of SUVs, when you drive them, you feel almost like you're sat on top of them rather than sitting in them. But the F-Pace allows you to sit nice and low. You've got a lovely steering wheel here, as I say, taken from the F-Type, so you can really immerse yourself in the experience. Now, as I mentioned before, this is the 3-litre diesel version. It has the 8-speed automatic gearbox, and what I would say is, if you're after that trademark Jaguar creamy, smooth drive, you want really the 6-cylinder diesel. I've driven the 2-litre diesels that are available with this model in other Jaguar cars, and they deliver certainly on the emissions and the economy on those 2 points. The one thing I would say is that they're a little bit, sometimes they're a little bit unrefined. So on startup, they can be a bit noisy, and also if you rev the car really hard, they can tend to get a bit harsh. But hopefully, as it comes across in this video, this 6-cylinder diesel is creamy smooth. It's a brilliant performer as well. So 0 to 60 in this car is under 6 seconds. Fuel economy wise, well, Jaguar will tell you it will do on average a claimed 53-54 miles to the gallon. I have, in a mixed amount of driving, I would say closer to 40 miles per gallon, and then around town you might be down at 35 miles to get to the gallon. In fairness to this car, it's only got 4,000 miles on the clock, so I imagine as it wears in a little bit better, you will probably get an improved economy figures. But as I say, 3 litre diesel for me is probably the pick of the range. Creamy smooth, ample loads of power, and the 8-speed automatic gearbox is supremely responsive. So you have the gear paddles on the back of the steering wheel, flick down, and then instantly the gear changes. You can have that interaction if you like, or you can just leave the automatic to its own devices, and it's very, very good at that as well. So that's the engine, that's the driving position, but of course it cannot claim to be a Jaguar unless it handles really well into the bends and into the corners. Now, SUVs sometimes can be a bit of a roly-poly affair. I have to say though, the F-Pace drives exceptionally well. It's got great steering, and you get into a lovely flow with the car from bend to bend, but it's really responsive. So it turns in very keen, there's a lack of body roll, lovely flat cornering, and certainly it's an SUV that really, it's the one SUV, let's say, aside from probably the Porsche, that you'll happily take the long road home just to have a bit more fun behind the wheel. The great thing as well, and again I've mentioned this in previous videos, that Jaguar is so good at doing, is that although they've developed and engineered this car to handle well, that hasn't come at the expense of ride comfort. So refinement wise, again, this is a very strong plus point for the car. It's nice and quiet in here, you have a nice smooth ride. With the exception, I have to say, these 22-inch wheels that are on this particular car, they look fabulous from the outside, but they do tend to make the ride a little bit firm at low speeds, so around town it can get a bit bumpy. This may come across in the video, but it thankfully smooths out on dual carriageways and motorways. So I would say really, if you want to have the best ride quality that you can get with an F-Pace, you'll want the smaller wheels, so they do a 19-inch or a 20-inch for example. But these 22-inch, they look fabulous, but they tend to make the ride firmer than what you would expect for a Jaguar. The touchscreen, as I said on the tech side of the video, if you want the ultra-fast responsive touchscreen, upgrade to the InControl Touch Pro. The standard screen's not bad, but it's just a bit slow. And as I've mentioned numerous times, when you're on the move, you want something very responsive if you're going to have to use a touchscreen. Otherwise, you're just simply pointing and trying to press whilst driving and keeping your eyes on the road, which isn't the best. But undoubtedly, the F-Pace is a great drive. It retains the sports car feel, if you like, that Jaguar are known for, and despite the raised ride height, which gives a lovely vantage point of the road ahead, it hasn't suffered any detriment to the Jaguar driving enjoyment that the brand is so well known for. So there you have Jaguar's new SUV. As always, there is a full written review on the car, the link to which is in the description below. But of course, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to get in touch. As always, thank you for watching, and I shall see you again soon.